Here we go. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We are here today with one of my best buddies in the world, Kevin Bormann, CFO of the Arthur M. Blank Family Office. I'll let Kevin kind of introduce himself and share his background, but thank you so much for being on the show, Kevin. We love having you.
Well, thanks for the invite. It's an honor to be an invitee. So thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So So you asked me to do an introduction. So I'm Kevin Bormann. I'm at the CFO for Arthur's family office here. This is like my fifth stop or so in my career. Married, 4 kids, ages 22 to 15. So and then been in this job for 3 years. Really like it, and learning a lot every day. So I graduated from Texas A&M University with a degree in accounting. Didn't know where that would take me for sure, but I started out at an accounting firm, and here I am, 20-something years later.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. How about maybe a little bit of just, you shared a little bit there, but just like your origin story, like getting into, family office space, the ultra high net worth,
Yeah,
investment space.
so
How did that all come to be?
yes, I'll make it a little longer than I do in
Sure.
normal introductions. But so I was at Ernst & Young, which is one of the big accounting firms, for 5 years, and my son Luke was born, and I was on a 2-week parental leave, and I got I got a call from a guy that I went to church with, and he said, "Hey, somebody told me you're a CPA," and I said, "Well, yeah," and he said, "Well, my business is growing and it's getting more complicated, and I think I need to hire a CPA to come on board," and I was like, not even thinking about a career change, and so I drove out and I met him. And just his energy, his passion for what he was doing. And, he was an entrepreneur in real estate. It was infectious. So I got very interested, and I ended up leaving Ernst & Young and went to work for this guy. I worked for him for 7 years. Started out as kind of a quote unquote controller, and then got promoted to kind of the CFO, if you will, role, although there wasn't an existing CFO. It was just more of a title change. That's how things work in smaller companies. And so probably about year 3 or 4, I just started absorbing all his personal life, as well as the normal duties related to the operating business of the real estate investment company. Because people, once they get to certain levels of wealth, they have estate planning issues, they have multiple homes, they have cars and other things, and so it all was, his world was expanding in a personal sense as well as his business sense, and so I just absorbed all of that, and it opened me up to a world that I had very little knowledge of. So it was a lot of learning. And a lot of realizing that I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I kind of, this is a common term in the industry, but someone that is in a family office often becomes like a quarterback, meaning they're not doing a lot of the stuff, but they're setting everything up with experts and people, but learning how to communicate in that language and understand that stuff is one of the things that was like a big learning curve for me. And so luckily for me, I worked for a guy initially that gave me a lot of leash, but there was a leash, so the leash felt good, but I could go far out to do things and fail, and he was like okay with that. So I think I grew into a place of serving him in a very good and dedicated way, and set up all his personal life and so forth. So that was kind of the origin of going from like the accountant, in an operating business type of situation, into the more family. It was like a very small step in the family office, if you will, because it wasn't really a family office. It was really just a family-owned business that I took care of the personal financial stuff for. So that was kind of step one,
Huh.
right? And then, well, I mean, like you're your own, family business right now. So you ended up you wear a lot of hats, and your world gets more complicated as you develop. So, I mean, you could speak to that too, I'm sure. And then, as things would have it, he had some health concerns, that were large, and large, especially for a young guy who, is his age. And so he made the decision in '09 that he was going to shrink his business, uncomplicate his life, because at the time he wasn't sure how long his life would be. Luckily, he's still alive and doing well today. But we had a conversation. He said, "Hey, I think it would be better for you and your career if you found something else, because I'm going to be minimizing and shrinking." And so around that same time, my wife was pregnant with our fourth child. So it was not the greatest time to, it was a lot of stress. There was 2008, 2009, that whole debacle. It definitely affected our business, being in real estate and land and having debt. And so I was stressed, and he was stressed with the pregnancy. But around that same time, I got recruited to take a family office job in San Antonio for a very high net worth family there. It was the CFO was retiring, and that CFO was retiring for health reasons. And I got and it was just a really good opportunity. So I took it, and I had, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months of crossover with their outgoing CFO, which is invaluable. And, one thing I learned from my time in this space is that there's know-how, and then there's, like, institutional knowledge within a family of, like, okay, yes, this thing X seems like it's this big to you, but it's this big to them. And knowing how to pivot and change and be flexible with those things has been a pretty big learning experience, as far as my career. But he was amazingly helpful in getting me geared up to take on that role. And it was probably about 6 or 7 months in where I finally felt like, okay, kind of get what I'm doing here. So it takes some time, especially with the complexities of some of these family offices that have, investments and operating businesses and things of that nature, where there's just a lot. And then there's a lot of history behind it. So this gentleman that I went to work for was, in his 70s when I went to work for him. So he had a long history of businesses, so there was a lot of things that you had to be aware of, and don't step on this, landmine, stay away from this. And luckily the staff there was, I think, 16 of us that worked in that family office. There was a couple very long time people that had been there, so they knew a lot of the stuff, which was very, very helpful for everybody. So I did that for a couple of years, and then as things happen in life, there was a need to try to get up to Minnesota because of health issues within the family, on my wife's side, and so an opportunity kind of just found me, for a kind of a startup within U.S. Bank, and it was their ultra high net worth wealth management group. And so I ended up leaving that job in San Antonio to take this job in Minneapolis, and move the family up to the Minneapolis area, and worked for U.S. Bank for right about 10 years. And in that saw a very different role. I was no longer a CFO. It was in the wealth management space. So it was advising multiple family offices. And my role in that was, I wasn't an investment guy, and I wasn't a banker, and I wasn't the estate planning lawyer. So it was the catch-all for everything that wasn't that. And so that was a good, I mean, I saw a lot of different family offices and a lot of different high net worth individuals. And, you know, each has their unique story. There's a lot of similarities with wealth creators. And then obviously there's a lot of differences too. But the similarities seem to have arced over all the different people that I've worked for and worked with. So I get a good time there. And in 2021, this opportunity showed up from a LinkedIn email, and I got the email and I told my wife Carissa about it, and he's like, "Well, you got to interview." And I said, "It's in Atlanta," and she's like, "You got to interview." And so I interviewed, and you know, one of the questions, the CFO. So it was a CFO role for this family office that I was interviewing for, and the CFO had been with Arthur at Home Depot for 19 years, and then was in the family office for 17. So he had, you know, 35 years of exposure to Arthur, and he was retiring. And my first interview was like a Zoom interview, and it was with him and another gentleman who's been with Arthur for 20 plus years also. And you know, we had a great conversation. And one of the questions they asked me was, why would you want to come to a situation like this? Like, what is it in you? And you know, the businesses that Arthur's in are public and commonly well known. I mean, he owns the Atlanta Falcons, he owns the Atlanta United MLS team, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, PGA Tour Superstores, and then ranching operations, guest ranching operations in Montana. And they're all on the website. Anybody could go there and look at them if they want.
Sure.
So they had explained a lot of that, and I did my own research, and you know, I'd been a kind of a fan of Arthur's, if you will, since I started doing my like DIY projects on my house. My wife and I, on our houses, we were real into remodeling, so we bought the Home Improvement 1, 2, 3 book from Home Depot and learned how to do a ton of stuff that way. So, yeah, they asked me, why would, you know, it was complicated. There was, you know, a lot going on. And I said, you know, one of the things that I missed about being a CFO of a family office is putting my hands on the steering wheel in the morning and really not knowing what my day was going to have. And they looked at me and they're like, well, if you end up here, you'll be at the right place. So, you know, with the bank, it was a very more kind of structured. You kind of had your systems, your set of meetings, and you know, client meetings, and this, and here it's, you know, you think your day's gonna be one thing, and then you get a call from Arthur, and it's a different thing, and it's, you know, it's interesting, it's exciting. You know, I feel like I've adapted well to here, and one of the great things, one of the great draws for me was the outgoing CFO. There was a 12 to 24 month runway where I would work alongside him and learn from him along the way. And that was highly appealing to me, given the experience that I'd had in San Antonio, where I got the 4-month runway with that gentleman. So that was highly appealing to me, because, you know, coming into a new system and, you know, a month later, you're it, you know, especially in an environment like this, it's very challenging when there's 40 years of history behind you that you don't really understand or know. So that was invaluable to me, to have that as part of the process of onboarding here. So that was September of 2021 was when I started here, and here I am.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, I'm sure each of your stops has had a little different culture, different core values. Maybe talk about Arthur's family office. I mean, is there a specific culture of the office, or has that been something consciously you guys have focused on, or, you know, certain core values? And I mean, to what extent, as the CFO, are you a part of like making that happen, if there is?
Well, yeah. In kind of a leadership position, you're definitely tasked with living out and trying to implement and encourage the core values. And he has them. They're all over the place. It's give back. It's on my little
There you go.
mouse pad.
Yes.
Give back to others, put people first, listen and respond, lead by example, innovate continuously, and include everyone. And these were core values that he actually established while he was building Home Depot. And, if anyone wants to read a good book about how Arthur got from basically Home Depot to where he is with ownership of the Falcons, he's got a book out. What's the name of the Good Company? Sorry, he has two books. It's called Good Company, and it's a good read. And he talks about it. He talks about how he implemented these at Home Depot, and he wanted full-time associates in the store, not part-time, and he wanted everybody to feel like part of the team. And he's very focused on associates, which employees and associates, and in this case, it's fan experience versus like at Home Depot is the customer experience. I mean, really focused on those. And he talks about if you do those things right, EBITDA and the financial metrics will follow. But if you don't do those two things well, you may have some short-term success with the financial results, but in the end, you're going to struggle. And he is very big on these core values. I mean, he goes back to them every single time. Anytime there's an onboarding or something, he's having a meeting where he's kind of introducing himself or his stuff. This is what he brings out. And he does, he thinks this way too. So as a culture, I mean, I think this is all over the culture in the businesses and the family office, and even as they relate to one another. So I'm definitely tasked with making sure that these are a part of kind of daily life here.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm sure, I
Yeah.
mean, everyone knows Arthur and the Falcons stole our quarterback from the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, which which he's such an awesome guy. I know you mentioned you had a chance to meet him at an event, but like what's maybe one of the coolest experiences, the most amazing, just whether it's in Arthur's family office or just in the past that you've gotten to experience as being part of, being a CFO in a family office, just something that like is just like a
Yeah.
memory burn for you.
Well, there's a few of them. I mean, I remember the first time I flew on a private plane was with the first guy. So that was, interesting. You pull into the airfield and you go through a little fence. Somebody comes and gets your keys and they go park your car and you walk right onto a plane. So that was an interesting experience, a memory burn for me. I think sometimes just the access you have to the stories of how people have built businesses is a big memory burn, and how watching what worked and what didn't, and and being able to kind of process that and see, oh, that makes sense, or I can see why that happened, or that was counterintuitive, that they chose this and it worked. And that's what I have noticed about, especially the three people I've worked directly for, is they took a small opportunity and they believed in themselves and they believed in what they were doing, and they didn't look back. They just built it. I mean, the first guy, he was going to college, and hold on, no, he was in an accident. He was hit by he was on a motorcycle, was hit by a car, and he got like $20,000 in settlement money. And he was enrolled in college at the time as a freshman. And he's like, so he decided to buy like a house and fix it up. And then he sold it and he made like good money. I don't know what the dollar figure was, but he was like, oh, wow, this is cool. And so he took that money and then he did it again. And then he did it again. And he's like, I'm just, this is what I'm going to do. So he dropped out of college and
Uh-huh.
did that. I mean, it started out with houses and before house flipping was cool, he was flipping houses. And then he just built it to, being a broker and this, and then he was an owner and then it was land. And so he believed in himself. He believed in that process. And the guy in San Antonio, he was an ER doctor. And,
Huh.
he noticed that patients that were able to move, like just physically move, got out of the hospital so much faster than the ones that couldn't move. And he found this bed company that was fledgling and or bankrupt that had this movable bed that moved the patient while they were laying down. And him and a guy went over, they looked at it, they're like, we can make this better. And
Huh.
it was driven by his belief of getting patients healthy and out of the hospital faster. So he did that, and he mortgaged, like his dad took a second mortgage on his house to help him fund this, and they were on the brink of like not making it happen, but he had believed and he believed and he was a faithful man and he prayed and it happened. And then finally the hospital's like, yeah, we want to lease those beds from you, and that was the rest of it. And so he was counterintuitive. He believed in something and he went full in. And same with Arthur with Home Depot. I mean, it talks about it in the story. Him and Bernie Marcus were, running a division of a holding company called Handy Dan, and they wanted
Huh.
to go big. They wanted to go this bigger box, concept, and the people at the holding company thought it was a bad idea. They were starting to get on the outs with him, so they fired both of them same day.
Huh.
And so those two got together and said, "Well, we're going to do this." And they got a money guy. And they, a couple years later, they opened their first Home Depot in Atlanta, and the rest was history. But it took belief in themselves to build their stuff. And so I think, like, as far as like those kind of memory burns, those are like things that are really present in how I don't know how it's motivating to be around that. And this past summer I was um, taking my son back to school. He was going to be at school going to Georgia here, and he got to come on one of the planes, and
Uh-huh.
it was actually pretty cool, like seeing his experience of it. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to. That's an interesting question. I might come back to that question if I have another memory burn.
No, those are great examples. And maybe what are some other, you kind of touched on this or you touched directly on it. What are some other just common things you've seen with these entrepreneurs that, believe in themselves, being counterintuitive, just going all in? Any other common things you've seen across the different businesses that they've built that, just seems to be a successful formula or trait or characteristic?
Yeah, um, you know, getting in with them, all three of them, I haven't been the initial person
Right.
or at the early start. So I can't really speak to that part, but as someone that's come in later into the process, what I've seen is they've developed a loyalty amongst
Huh.
the people that work for them. And because they all three had longtime associates, longtime partners, longtime, people that have been around them for a long time. And I think it takes that. I think so. I think it's a testament to um, the individuals, the wealth creators themselves, as far as knowing, like, they know this part really well and they can do this, and they either don't want to do this or it's not their area of expertise, but they know they need to hire good people to do this other stuff. So I think all three of them exhibited that knowledge. Like, I got to get help. I can't do this all on my own. I gotta get people that are not smarter than me, but that do things differently, that have different ideas and can help support, the vision that he had. Because the people around, when I got with the guy in Austin, the real estate guy, he had longtime associates who had been around him and doing business with him, partners and stuff, 20 years. I mean, and you don't get that way by doing those people wrong. I mean, if you step on somebody, they're, and then same with the guy in San Antonio, the president of the family office there had worked for him for 30 years. Wow. And yeah, and done well for himself financially, as being part of and around him, and loyal, and same with the people that are here. Many of the leaders that are here and around Arthur have been here for a long time, and so it's a testament to what the wealth creators have created for and in those individuals that support them. So I think that's one commonality, is they've built good teams. Another one is, like I said, they believe in themselves, and they're okay with risk.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big piece of it that I think that every one of them exhibits, is the risk of failure in their mind was less than the risk of success. The risk of not trying. I don't know if that makes sense. So they were willing to take the risk because they believed in what they were trying to accomplish, and so those stories are good stories. And and some other commonalities is they're very dialed in, and their antennas are up for people around them that are trying to take advantage of them. And there are a lot of them, those people around, that see a big checkbook and think that, oh, I can be crafty enough to get mine from this person. And these people, they didn't get where they were by being dumb. And so they're very attuned to the motivations of those around them, and they can usually see it pretty early and pretty quickly. But they also it's a little bit of a lens through, unfortunately, which they have to kind of view all new people. Is this person trying to kind of, quote unquote, get over on me at my expense? And I think to a person, I think they would all rather not participate in that. What I'm trying to say here is if it meant them missing out on an opportunity, but letting themselves get taken advantage of in the process, they would rather just miss out on the opportunity. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very good.
I'm sure you see it too. I mean, like, with when you're building a business, you're always having to ask, what are these people's motivations that are working with me?
Yeah. No. How about for, like, you talk about like your kids, their friends, people in college. Any thoughts or advice you'd give to like these up and comers, like people that want to potentially be entrepreneurs or want to build something like what Arthur has built, or others? Just
I mean,
life advice,
I
business
think,
advice. Yeah.
well, I think, being around these people for my whole career, or not whole career, but most of my career, it often seems like, there's times when I'm like, what did I do wrong? Like, why didn't I do this? And I mean, I think early on, I just didn't have any belief that I could. I just was like, that's not me. But I think there's a little bit of an entrepreneur in a lot of us. And so for young people coming out, or maybe early in their career, especially when they don't have, as many financial obligations, or like kids, or, things like that, it's the time to take risk. It's not the time to be safe with your career when you're starting out. And like the first guy I worked for, he wasn't married, he had no kids. He took advantage of this spot he was in life to develop and build his business, because he didn't, if he failed, it was like, oh, well, he can eat ramen noodles. He doesn't
Right.
care,
Yeah.
But when you have kids and a family and you're building that, it's a different thing to have to kind of deal with. And the two other guys, they'd had, some level of success before they went out. So they had a little bit of financial security, with not a ton, but a little bit with which to go pursue that dream. And I would say, I have encouraged my kids, my wife and I have encouraged them that, like, being an entrepreneur it gives you a lot of flexibility. And that flexibility also can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the flexibility, the responsibility can be uh, heavy, like,
Hmm.
there's not a big company behind you writing you a paycheck. You're eating what you kill. And but if you're successful and you do things well, and you do it, you have some flexibility, especially later in life, to be able to make the call, if you will, like, this is where we're going to live. I'm going to not work on Fridays, or you get to dictate a little bit of your life more. So I would say, if you have an entrepreneurial bent at all, as a young person, to pay attention to it, and lean into that and pursue it at some level. And you don't have to create the next Facebook or whatever to have a good life. And I mean, maybe you're a plumber, right? And your skills are plumbing, and college wasn't your thing. Well, go build your plumbing business. And plumbers make good money, and they're super smart people. And there's people that have developed and built plumbing companies that are doing very well in life. I'm sure you've heard podcasts, Kit. You're
Uh-huh.
an avid podcast listener. I've listened to a few of those stories, and you're like, wow, that guy never went to college. He started out, as a journeyman, and he did his own thing, and now he's doing his plumbing, and now he owns, and he has like 19 people that work for him. And, so that's what my advice would be, is lean into, if you got the bent at all, lean into it, and
Uh-huh.
don't tell yourself you can't do it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent advice. All right, last question. I know we're running out of time here. Building legacies. I mean, part of just like the nature of family office is, you've had this great success, you've built the family office, but now we're looking at, what are the next generations? What's the legacy I want to leave for my family or my associates? I guess this is a super open-ended question, but like, how do you guys think about, or how does Arthur think about his legacy using the family office, or maybe some of the other examples of the family offices you've worked at? How do these,
Yeah.
heads of these family offices think about legacy? And I'm sure I've talking to so many different family offices. I mean, the common thing is, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. So they're all totally different,
Yeah.
but maybe speak to a little bit
Yeah.
about just legacy.
Yeah. And I would say that of the three that I've worked with, they are all very different in that
Huh.
way. And even reflecting back to the different family offices and clients at the bank, you have some, matriarch and patriarchs that the business is almost like part of, like, a kid in the family. Like, they want it to go down and succeed, and the next generation also feels that way. Like, we got to do this. This is who we are. This is part of our DNA. And so there's a lot big in those instances. There's a lot of preparation that is required. And by preparation, I don't mean college. I mean communication, being open with them, bringing them into the business early, not giving them too much access to the spoils of the business, if you will,
Mm.
to keep the motivation going. Um, but the first guy I worked with, his business stuff was kind of cut short by the health stuff. So just about the time when his kids would have been kind of coming of age to develop into it, he had to simplify. They weren't ready to take over by any stretch. They weren't even close. And he was in a spot where he was focusing on survival. So I think that, you know, different environments lead themselves to different conclusions. But and you know, like in Arthur's case, you know, he has 6 kids, and you know, there are kids that are interested, and there are kids that aren't. And he's done a, you know, very good job of like making available to them the opportunity, but not making it a requirement, or not like having it even seem remotely like, oh, you don't want it, you know, like he just loves them all. And so I think, you know, one of the things that that all of these people that I've worked with before, they all have they're charitably minded, because they know they've been a beneficiary of a lot of goodness, right, financially. And so they've all established foundations. And I think that is a unifying type of experience for the next generation to see, okay, mom and dad made, you know, all this money, you know, but what I see them doing is taking what they've made and trying to make the world a better place with it. And so I think that legacy is very consistent across family offices that I've been a part of, at least. And so I think from a legacy standpoint, you know, all the parents want their kids to do good in this world, to be good citizens of the world, and some do it better than others. And I don't think the ones that don't do it as well, I don't think it's ever intentional. It's hard. I mean, it's hard when you've been super successful and you have a lot of wealth, to create the drive, let's say, that someone who had to pay their way through college, you know, they're literally sweating about making their mortgage payment. That's hard to create in someone that's never had to sweat those things.
Yeah.
And so, so yeah, I mean, it's across the board, but I think the concept of giving back is one that kind of permeates most of these family offices.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, good. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. This has been
Yeah.
fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate the time to chat, and yeah.
All right.
Good
Yeah.
to talk to you.
All right. Look forward to seeing you super soon. Thanks so much, Kevin. All right.
Thank you.
All right.